For me, it's about really learning to love uncertainty. It's a gift. Whenever there's uncertainty, you can do anything you want, right? Versus like being worried about it. And so once somebody finds certainty, they almost always ask the question like, well, what's possible? Okay, now I know we're going to go in this direction. Like, can we go in any other directions? Like they immediately start seeking freedom.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Uncut Design podcast, where I speak with design leaders at Microsoft who are shaping the future of user experiences. In this series, we'll explore their unique approaches, lessons learned, and insights on driving impactful design in an ever-evolving industry. Today, my guest is Joe Hallock, a partner design director in the Azure Cloud Experiences Studio at Microsoft. Joe is a seasoned leader with a wealth of knowledge about the relationship between design and business, team dynamics, and turning challenges into opportunities. In our conversation, we talk about balancing user needs with business goals, how to advocate for design decisions effectively. We also touch on the SCARF model, a super interesting framework for reflecting on our experience in corporate environments and its relevance to design and leadership. Plus, Joe also shares practical insights for early in career designers, as well as advice on navigating setbacks and so much more. It was such an honor getting to know Joe this past summer. I was coming into the office about 5 days a week for the duration of my internship, and Joe was always at work before I arrived and still there after I left. Joe's level head and ability to navigate hyper-complex and ambiguous problems has been truly inspiring to me. He has a deep-rooted passion for the cloud computing space and holds himself to such a high standard, which is one of the many things we share in common. Joe is one of the most kind-hearted, genuine, and funny people I've met this past summer, so I'm extremely excited to have him featured in this episode. And with that, I bring you Joe Hallock.
Thank you so much again for meeting today. It means a lot, and I just came back from vacation. How was it, by the way?
You're welcome. My vacation was good. I think it's important to take some time off. Every summer I try to take some time off and relax a bit. I'm always a better designer when I'm calm and rested.
Nice. Yeah, I can definitely agree with that, relate with that. But yeah, for today's episode, wanted to talk about really navigating the corporate design landscape and how to advocate effectively and gain support. I'm super interested to get your thoughts surrounding that. But for starters, could you just share a little bit about your origin story and kind of what sparked your passion into design and how that led to Microsoft?
Sure. Let's see. When I was young, I wanted to design things. I didn't know there was a field around design, but I really liked fancy houses when I would see them, or big buildings that were designed in an interesting way. And so I thought to myself, I want to be somebody who makes houses or designs houses. And as I got older and I learned about different things, I enrolled in an architecture program. I ended up winning a competition in high school that helped me get a scholarship to go to college to be an architect. And that was about the same time the internet was invented. So I'm a little bit old. But one of the things I realized about architecture is that it's a little bit math and a little bit art. And I like the balance of those two things. If one day I was a bit more logical, I would do more of like the problem solving or math. And other days, if I was maybe feeling a little bit more artistic, I would hang out on that side of my brain. But the internet was invented. And I also realized it took years and years and years to become an architect. And it only took me a weekend to learn how to write HTML. So I started designing websites and designing the UI for websites, which is the part I really liked. I mean, I did some development, but I enjoyed the visual aspects of design and solving problems. That led me to starting 2 companies. I started a design company and a web hosting company. The web hosting company, I did this thing where I started taking people's servers and I would host them on my own. I rented a rack in a data center and I started hosting people's servers because I could get paid a lot more money if I did that. And I ended up selling that business off and found that there was a design job at Microsoft working with servers. And so I was tired of owning my own businesses and I sold the company. So I went to Microsoft and I joined as a junior designer, even though I was nearly 30 years old. I started as a junior designer, but I really liked that I could focus on design and work in a subject matter that I knew something about. And then I've been here since for 17 years. I've been here, which is 15 years longer than I thought I was going to be here. But that's how it works sometimes. Yeah.
That's a long time.
There's probably some details I'm missing, but I knew I wanted to be a designer when I was young. I just didn't have the language. And I like helping people and solving problems, and I like stuff that's visual versus code. And so that's never left me. And so I've always aligned my work every day to those things.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And yeah, I think you did mention in our first meeting, I think it was the Jay-Z quote. I can't remember what it was, but that really resonated with me. And yeah, I think that it kind of speaks well to this notion of work-life balance. Especially like just with early in career, you can definitely fall into, just working extremely hard.
When I owned my 2 businesses, when I was young in my 20s, I loved the hustle. I liked working on my own thing, and it was very exciting. And there was a quote I heard, I believe it was Jay-Z. And he said, when you're sleeping, I'm making money. And that it's a little immature at the moment, but I liked the hustle in the statement. Like I'm gonna make something of myself. And part of that was, to be vulnerable for a minute. Part of it is pushing past my own insecurity or my own, like, I'm not sure if I can do this. So those feelings, and saying like, I can do this, I'm going to push them, like hard work beats talent, approach. And another part of it was just trying to like make something for myself. I think it's important for people to chase those dreams when they can, even though the effort was significant. I was really tired for a long time because I was working so much, but it led me to places I wanted to be.
I love that quote. It definitely embodies this notion of just like anything's possible, really.
Yeah.
Put your mind to it, work hard. All of that. I'm curious what is something about design that's clear to you but you don't think is quite as clear to others?
I think a lot of designers believe they need to come up with the answer or to solve the problem or to figure it all out. Like there's this huge burden on many designers to like find that answer. And that's a lot of pressure and a lot of weight. And I don't think that's actually the job of a designer. I mean, to some extent it is, but actually I think the work of a designer is to create options and to articulate a path forward so that decisions can be made. And so not necessarily the final decision, but in the next decision. So I think design, it's inherently iterative. So my approach is to draw lots of pictures, so lots of iteration, to be really fast. And my only goal is to influence the next decision. And so I think there's something liberating about removing the burden of having to come up with a final decision. I don't think about that. I'm just like, what's the next decision? What do we need to do by 11, by the afternoon, by next week? I do think that having a long-term goal or a goal, like what is success going to look like? I think that's important. I don't want to diminish that goal, but I think a lot of designers accept this huge burden, and they don't need to do that. Our job is to help somebody else make a decision. Whether that's the customer, whether that's the engineer, whether that's our manager. Our job is to help somebody make a decision. And so sometimes you can just draw the worst design, and that helps somebody decide to not do something, right? So I kind of like that philosophical approach. Being creative requires a certain level of vulnerability. And if you're carrying around weight of something, it's hard to be vulnerable. Yeah. I could ramble about all of this. I'm trying to be somewhat precise in my answers.
I appreciate it.
But yeah. I mean, you've been a designer here for a little bit. When you take on a project, what is the thing you feel? Somebody gives you a responsibility. Like, what do you feel in that responsibility?
Oh, man. A whole lot of emotions, I'll say.
What's heavy about it, though?
Definitely I'd say the complexity always weighs heavy.
Right.
Feelings of, is this too much for me to take on?
Right.
Is this, am I capable? Am I able to execute on this to how they really want or envision? There's a lot of internal conflict there, which I've learned to suppress and try to really move forward and take it one step at a time.
So there's this I call it a burden, but there's this immediate reaction to look inside, right? Like it's like you're looking in to yourself, when the job of a designer is to look out. Does that make sense? Like you're looking at what somebody else needs. And if you're carrying around the stuff about, when you're looking in and that you're holding on to that, unconsciously, I think the goal is, I don't want to lose my job, or I don't want to screw up, or I don't want to disappoint someone, or I don't want my parents to be upset at me for messing this up, whatever it is, instead of what does this customer need? And so if you flip that around and you're looking outside, you're what decision does this person need to make? It's almost, to me, it's freeing, because it's sort of like, what gift can I give this person? I'm going to remove some stress from them, a decision they're going to make, or whatever. I'm going to use my talent to draw pictures so that somebody can see something new. And I will say, though, I mean, when I was early in my career, I constantly worried about, am I good enough? Do I even know what I'm doing? All this language, especially at Microsoft, some of this stuff doesn't make sense. It's so complicated. At the end of the day, though, it's not about the complicated stuff. It's can somebody find something, sort, filter, search, discover, edit, remove? That stuff is universal, at least in the space we work.
That's a great answer.
Thanks for sharing about yourself. Yeah, I know that.
Of course, yeah. No, I think it's definitely a learning process, and I think the culture here, to learn it all versus know it all, it definitely resonates a lot with folks, especially in early career. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I want to ask, in our previous discussion, you mentioned the SCARF model.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate more on what that framework is and how it's relevant for designers and collaboration?
Throughout this talk we're going to have, you're probably going to hear me talk about like feelings and like psychological stuff. And it's because that's something we all share as people. But also, to me, I think that's the sort of stuff that gets in the way versus some precise answer or direction or advice that works for everybody. So the SCARF model is it's sort of a work-related model that has to do with the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And the gap there is like what creates stress. I'm oversimplifying this, but SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and familiarity. So status. And it doesn't mean that all five of these things exist, but if you're thinking about like, okay, you're an intern right now at Microsoft. If you come back and you get the job, you're going to be let's say a designer 1, right? Yeah. And Microsoft's really good at creating these levels and layers of status to encourage continuous growth. I don't think it's maybe the best thing for us as human beings, but it exists. It's also in the military and all over the place, right? Yeah. Anyway, we have status. And so some people at a certain point in their career, they worry like, oh, am I going to maintain my status? Or am I doing enough to get that next level of status? So that's just a thing we deal with sometimes. And it comes and goes in waves. Certainty, for me, is one of the most challenging stressors. I think I'm always seeking certainty whether I know it or not. And uncertainty is where opportunity exists. And so my reaction sometimes is like, well, what are we going to do? What's the answer? Like, what do they think? I'll be asking these questions, and I'm seeking some certainty because it creates calm for me. But it's not really, I'm not really getting to the point. I'm just trying to calm my own stress. So certainty is a big one. And I think that it's something that if you know about it, you can relax a little bit. Like, oh, I'm going to be stressed. Like when there's an org change or when there's a move. Or let's say, I think a lot of people have experienced this when they're young. Like their parents say, oh, we're gonna move to a different city, or you're going to move schools. Or even just go from like elementary to junior high, right? Or something. Immediately there's this like status, there's certainty. It's like, oh no, where's my class? Who's my teacher going to be? Am I going to have friends? Yeah. Whatever it is. Okay. So autonomy is to me, it sort of relates to like, okay, am I going to do this by myself? Should I do it by myself? Should I do it as a group? As a designer, when somebody does something on their own, it feels good because they have absolute control. But when you're designing something for 1 million people or 10 million people, you cannot design it by yourself. You have to design it with other people. When you design with other people, you give up autonomy, you give up control, and that creates stress. Especially, trying to speak to maybe somebody who's listening to this who might still be in school. Yeah. This is like the thing that comes up when you're asked to be in a group project and there's 5 of you and 2 of them aren't like really doing their job. Do you know that feeling? That's the stress. It's like, come on, help out. Exactly. And then when they finally help out, they're not doing the thing you want them to do. Relatedness and familiarity. I think this is important to know about. At a big company, we have, in our team, we have a bunch of different disciplines. We have designers and researchers and content designers and program managers and engineers. And you may or may not relate to those people, but that's just the job aspect. You could have like culture, ethnicity, a range of things that you may or may not relate to somebody about, right? And for some people, for many, some combination of those can create like positive behavior or apprehension or something like it. And I think I think sometimes it's unconscious. Like, oh, I'm not sure. There's like I struggle with older men who are in engineering manager positions. Like, I'm almost 50, so I'm talking about somebody who's like 65.
Yeah.
They sort of have this like know-it-all, I'm an expert persona. This is a sweeping generalization.
Yeah.
Not everybody's like this. But I struggle. They don't have any appreciation for what a designer does. They never talk about their feelings, so I struggle to relate to that type of person, and that changes my vocabulary. I'm picking a very safe example. There's other examples where it's more visible, but that's like a thing. I'm trying to, familiarity, similar, like, especially for a designer, like let's say you get a job and you learn how to do that, how to be a designer at that company, and then you move jobs. And now you're going to learn how to be a designer at a different place, and it's not going to be familiar. You think that, okay, I'm just using the tools, it's all the same, but it's not. Yeah. And all of a sudden, all of your tips and tricks and best practices and the things that made you a hero at the first company don't exist anymore. That can cause stress. Fortunately, if you stick around for like 18 years or 17 years, that's not so much of a problem for me anymore. It's probably a reason why I haven't moved, right? Because I don't like being in an unfamiliar place in terms of like designing. So that's a reason. Like, I bet if you talk to lots of people who've been here forever, they probably don't like unfamiliar situations, And there's people who thrive at that. There's people I know who go to different jobs every couple of year, and they need that. It's not even that they thrive; it's like they need it. What might be a stressor for one person isn't for another. Sorry if I'm giving you too long of answers.
No, that's great. That's honestly perfect. Because I know I definitely can struggle on like the certainty aspect of things and wanting to know, just being certain and about the direction things are heading in, which most often you're not going to have that, and it's going to be pretty ambiguous,
especially with AI.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Like in the olden days, like a year ago, we would do a design flow, and it had like a start and an end screen.
Yeah.
Right. Like set up this thing. I think in the future with AI, that's less predictable. Not because it's good or bad, just I think it'll be tailored to that person. It won't be a design flow. Yeah. It'll be a personalized design flow for that person, for that scenario. And that might be quite dynamic. And that changes like how we design. Yeah. We can't iterate for every single person. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
I couldn't agree more. It's definitely these systems are moving to be much more adaptable, and it's exciting for sure. But I wanted to ask you, how would you say for designers who are like early in career, who are struggling kind of with the status and certainty aspect, should navigate that landscape so they can ultimately grow in their career?
Well, I think everybody's different, so they have like a different approach. I would say that there are certain people who struggle with status. And I'll say some people have a friend who's the same age, who's like more successful.
Yeah.
And they're comparing themselves to this other person. And, when you see it, you want to say to the person, like, nothing about this is helping you be more successful. Like, nothing about worrying about it. But when you're in the middle of it, it feels hard because you're like, well, maybe I'm not being recognized, or maybe they don't see me or maybe I don't have what it takes, or I'm not special, or maybe they're just lucky that they got that interview before me, or whatever. There's all this stuff that's wrapped into that. And I'll speak for myself. I think part of it, if somebody's struggling with that, it's a little bit developmental. Like you sort of have, I think it's healthy to go through that and be on the hard side of it. Like, you're not the one who's chosen. You weren't the one who's picked. You're not the one with the high paying job, whatever. Like, feel the shitty part of that. Then when you are the one who's picked, or you did make it, or whatever, you'll have this empathy for other people who might be around, which I think is really important. But at the end of the day, status is our own ego stuff, right? And so, like, how do you get around it? You can try to not worry about it. I mean, I just own that I'm an individual. There's certain things I'm going to be great at, and others that I'm just going to struggle with. And I'm okay with it. I want to say that the feelings are valid, though. Like, when people feel that way, I want to say that those feelings are valid and important, and I'm not saying don't feel that. But I'm also saying, like, spending time spinning on that isn't constructive. Often I'll say, like, busy people are happy people. So if you can turn it into, like, well, I'm going to focus on getting this thing done. I'm going to focus on doing some good work. Immediately, the stress around that status goes away because they're making progress towards a goal. So I'm sort of thinking out loud. That was a long answer to a short question.
That's great.
Certainty is, like, I'm not going to go through all 5 of them, but certainty, for me, it's about really learning to love uncertainty. It's a gift. Whenever there's uncertainty, you can do anything you want, right? Versus, like, being worried about it. When there's a tension between security and freedom, right? Like, when you have one, you want the other. Like, when I'm a freelance designer and I have absolute freedom to design whatever I want, all I want is a job and benefits and some security. Like, when I'm stuck in a corporate job, all I want is, like, a vacation and, like, to do what I want and nobody telling me what to do. Like, when you have one, you want the other, right? That's the tension between security and freedom. And so once somebody finds certainty, they almost always ask the question, like, well, what's possible? You know, okay, now I know we're going to go in this direction. Why can we go in any other directions? Like, they immediately start seeking freedom. It may not be the right security and freedom, but you're probably getting what I'm saying. Like, there's these absolutes. And I would also say that exists outside of design. You know, like, when people like, when I got married, I was like, okay, it's all settled. And I'm like, oh man, it's all settled. Or, you know, like, when I, like, especially when I picked this job, or, whenever I make a big decision, I'm going to have some freedom. Like, I almost always go, well, how am I going to pay my bills? So anyway, I think that's the tension I experience when it comes to certainty.
Yeah, I love that. It's definitely been a big learning of mine from Microsoft is finding comfortability within that uncertainty, ambiguity.
Right. When you start designing something, you, like, if we said, like, I need you to design this by 4:00 and, like, follow this guidelines, it's sort of like paint by number. Mm-hmm. There's nothing really creative about it at all. Yeah. But if I said, like, okay, give me, like, 3 explorations to try to do this, there's a balance there of, like, okay, you get some freedom, you know?
Yeah.
You could go make one using the guidelines, you can make one not. Yeah. So I think that's a way to, like, talk yourself through that tension. Yeah. And I think a good manager will learn about the person and help them navigate that based on who they're, like what's on their mind. Some people need certainty to perform. And I'll say, here is your checklist, and they love it and they want to just check off the things. And other people, they need freedom. Yeah. And so I'll say, well, let's see what you do.
Yeah. No, I love that because it inherently forces collaboration. I think.
Yeah.
You can't do that stuff in a vacuum at all. And
some people want to try that though.
Yeah.
Because they want control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All these things are interrelated. I'm not a psychologist or anything. This is just my life's experience dealing with these tensions and pressures. So if somebody's like using Wikipedia to look at, I'm sorry if I'm incorrect. It's more of my interpretation of the corporate design world. It's not scientific.
Great insights. You have a lot of valuable things. So thank you for sharing. Wanted to ask you a bit about, like, after receiving kind of significant pushback on a product vision, how are you like bouncing back, keeping the team motivated, and refocusing on the bigger picture?
As a manager or as an IC?
That's a great question.
Let me answer it as an IC.
Yeah.
Like, let's say I'm an individual contributor. Like, I'm doing the design work and I create something and there's a lot of pushback on it. Okay, so when you're early in your career and you're designing, because one isn't necessarily an expert on all the design patterns and tools and stuff, you end up like using your imagination to sort of solve these design problems. And when your design solution comes out and you've used your imagination to do this and it's criticized, that criticism feels very personal. Right? Now, if you're a senior designer and you've used a whole bunch of different tricks and techniques to get to your design, like you followed certain patterns, or you've, leveraged the work of other people in a certain way, and it's criticized, it doesn't feel personal. It's like, oh, I see what you're saying. Like, let's use that other method or that other, like, progressive disclosure approach or whatever it is, right? It's more like you're putting a jigsaw puzzle together and like, oh, I just need to do it differently. So early in career, the first time I did a big design vision, it was brutally criticized. And in hindsight, it wasn't brutally criticized. It just felt really hard to be criticized. And I realized after some time reflecting on it, I realized that I had put my own creativity into something. And what I didn't like was my creativity being criticized. But I had no choice because I didn't know all of the tricks. It takes years to be exceptional at something, right? Not that I'm exceptional, but it takes years to be elevated so that you're not just like using your imagination all the time. I think that's really important for early in career people to hear and I think that's why the expectations at every level, they shift. At the beginning, you're essentially learning how to be a designer at that company. It's not you're learning Figma or a tool. It's you're like learning like how to be effective in that role, in that team. And then, you elevate your game to influencing others around you, to influencing teams, to influencing the global patterns, to influencing across Microsoft, to influencing the industry. And so when I hear someone talk about, well, I'm ready to be a senior designer, I'll just like do the math and like, are they influencing across the division? Yes or no? Do people see them as a leader? Like naturally? I think those characteristics are earned, and it's not about can they draw a really great picture. I'm off topic, but I'll pause because I got more to say. But I want to make sure I attach it to the right question.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, Beautiful answers to these questions. I'm curious if when leadership takes a direction that you don't fully agree with, how do you ensure that your team's efforts are still contributing value?
I think it's important for me to honor the responsibility and accountabilities of other people I work with. So my leadership is in a position to make decisions for the whole division. That's their job, is to make those decisions. It doesn't matter if I agree with them or not. They're accountable for that. In fact, this is a good maybe segue to gently, there is a difference between accountable and responsible. And a responsibility can be shared, but only one person can be accountable for something. So if I think about my leadership, they're accountable for something. We both share a responsibility. So I try to compartmentalize those decisions into them being accountable. If they provide a direction, they're accountable for that. My job is to share the responsibility and to influence that the best I can. But I try not to worry too much about whether I agree or disagree. Fundamentally, there's going to be times where I might have a disagreement, but they're paying me to sit in this beautiful building and draw pictures. I'm pretty thankful and grateful. So if they want something to be a different color or a different shape or be more awesome or whatever, more simple, I'm going to draw that picture. I think at the end of the day, this is going to be a big statement. I think a designer is trained in school to think of the customer, the end user, as the most important person. While that is true to some extent, I think also your customer is the people you're working with on the team. It's your leadership team. It's the people that you might support if you're a manager. Those are all your customers, in air quotes. And I think to be a designer, you're in service of all those people. And so if I don't agree with something, I try really hard to have a growth mindset about it and learn why do I disagree? It's usually because I don't understand. It's usually that. It's not because I'm right. It's most likely because I don't have the same worldviews as they do. Again, uncertainty is like an opportunity. Did that come close to answering your question?
I think so. No, you hit it on the head, and I think that creative conflict is great, and it's oftentimes, I think we can feel like people have, especially probably PMs out of all groups, have a strong kind of gut reaction or
Sure.
that they want certain things to go into. But I think it's at the end of the day, remembering it's a team sport, and you have to leverage each other's strengths, trust on each other to hit
You're talking about you're going right into scarf stuff, right? There's the status thing, one role versus another. There's that. There's who knows the answer.
Yeah.
Is the answer familiar, relatable? Whose job is it? Which is autonomy. So, and if you think about that, there's also this woven into this are power dynamics that create different forms of anxiety and stress. There is a hierarchy. And even within that, even with peers, there's power dynamics. I try my best to have a sensitivity to that. I don't like power dynamics, but I know that I can create them. And I know I can do that without knowing I'm doing it, Everybody can. I'm a white middle-aged guy with a big title. And I want to own that I sit on some privilege. I sit on some stuff I didn't earn, even though I have it. And so I think it's important if you're going to be a leader to really try to stay real about the dynamics that you can create. To me, that's like never-ending work, right? Because I mean, the environment changes, who I'm with changes, I change, the role changes. But when you're designing something, like I said earlier, there's like a certain amount of vulnerability to be creative. Power dynamics like screw that up so fast, you know? And I think some managers, they can, like new managers can tend to treat their team like an extension of their arms and hands. Like, this is my idea. We're going to design my idea. Again, sweeping generalization, but it's important to, like, I'm just going to call it out. Like, that's a thing that happens frequently. And I think the best leaders, whether they're a manager or not, you know, the function of leadership is to create more leaders. And so to do that, I think you remove the dynamic that is like an unseen boundary. You remove it so they can be a leader. I'm way off into like, we're not even talking about Pixies, but I hope at least one person listens to your podcast.
Hope more than one, yeah. But
Like, the last guy just like turned it off.
yeah. It's great. There's a lot of value here. I think people really enjoy this, and I just want to say, like, yeah, I really admire like your level of reflection and honesty you have with yourself. How you feel.
Well, you're kind. I mean, I want to say I'm trying to do my best at answering these questions. I do make mistakes, and I know what it feels like to. Well, you know, being a designer here, it's a small group. I mean, there's 220,000 people. I don't know how many designers there are, but I bet it's like 3,000 or 4,000 maybe of that number.
Yeah.
So let's say 1.5%.
Yeah.
So, you know, let's say just like rough numbers, 1 out of 100 people are a designer. So it's like a constant battle to just do a good job or be seen or have impact. It's hard. So I'm familiar with some of the dynamics I'm talking about, and I want to just say that those dynamics also exist like within the discipline. And that's like our job to see it, deal with it, you know, remove it if possible.
Yeah.
Because if we're fighting sort of within our own group, we're never going to be successful. We just don't have the number of people to be influential at scale. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Yeah. It's really is a team sport, and I think people can often get caught in that competition or you know, having their kind of own agenda. But yeah, once I think, especially within like this recent AI boom and craze, I think it's become very evident that we all are on the same team and marching towards a shared mission.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's honestly, this is like the best time to be at this company. And I'm so lucky and happy, I think, that I'm actually here.
You're at the very beginning of something, you know?
Yeah, I was talking to one of my intern buddies the other day, and, you know, this beats being at Apple when Steve Jobs was there, or, you know, being a part of Google's shift to design. I think this is like truly like, this is going to be big, and none of us can predict what the future looks like, but it'll be crazy, I think.
I think the feeling, the optimism and the excitement, it's important to use those two things to like push through the dark times.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be some tough times that come up,
Exactly.
you know, because we don't like, we have a vision of what we want something to be, and then we will see the reality of where we're at. And there's going to be a big gap between where we are and where we want to be in the SCARF model. So keep that enthusiasm. It's similar to me to like the early adopter curve. You know what I'm talking about? Like you get somebody with a product and there's like these early adopters that are really excited about something new. And then there's like this gap. And then you get the people who, anyway, it's the enthusiasm that keeps people going.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here. I think this is exciting.
Oh yeah, I'm obsessed with this company to say the least. It's I love it here. It's
It'd be fun to talk to you in 20 years.
Hopefully I'll be here.
You can find me. And I'm going to hear your stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be a leader of leaders here.
I appreciate it. Fingers are crossed, but we'll take baby steps towards that.
I take.
Yeah. How do you advocate for design decisions that, in a way that both respects business priorities and stays true to your vision?
The last part of that question I want to sort of address first, which is I try not to like feel a sense of ownership of some kind of vision. It's not really mine. And if I go back to earlier, like at the beginning, I try not to think of like the final result. It's just like the next decision. So I release myself from the vision or the ownership of the thing. Okay. What I think you're getting to is influence. And influence is interesting because the hardest version of influence is influence without authority. Like when you don't have any authority and you're trying to influence someone. Like if you have authority of some kind, let's say you're a teacher or a manager or a parent or something, influence is a little bit easier because they're probably going to listen. Do you know?
Yeah.
But when you're trying to influence without authority, like you're influencing another discipline or you're influencing some peers or another team, that's the hardest version of influence. And so, but the answer to the question is not that hard. You just need to figure out like what those other people need to be influenced, right? So go to the SCARF model. Like they want to feel some confidence that the direction we're going in is the best direction. And you can do that through research, through data science. You know, you can give them some prediction scientifically about like the success of a certain design. They're going to want to know if we're going to be better than the competition or stack up. You can do a competitive review. That's why our team has a heavy research organization. That's why our team is multidisciplinary and we have research, is because I don't think that a designer is naturally equipped to influence across like all the whole spectrums of ways that people need to be influenced. Right? If I'm just a designer by myself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the person to tell me what their best idea is. I'm going to ask the customer what their best idea is. And then I'm going to have my best idea and I'm going to draw all three and I'm going to put them out there and say like, let's pick your idea, the customer's idea, my idea, and like open it up and like sort of co-design. Again, I don't own it. So that's just my approach to like iterate through the problem. But if I can't iterate, then I'm going to have research. I'm going to have some data or insights that inform the decision making. Because that's, to me, the fastest way at Microsoft to influence is give somebody some evidence that helps them feel like the direction's going the right way. Plus, you don't have to like pick a side either. You can come at it thinking like, well, I don't know what the right decision is. Mm-hmm. You know, here's 5 ideas, or here's this, here's what this data says.
Yeah.
Influence is tricky. I guess at the end of the day, it's important to remember that the program manager, the engineer, and the designer, they're on the same team. Like they fail or succeed together.
Yeah.
Like one can't succeed and the other one fail. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could try, but the whole team will fail.
Yeah.
In reality, nobody will feel good. So I think that that's an important part of like collaboration.
I love that. Yeah. It's yeah, I'm a big proponent of having, as much co-design sessions, whiteboarding sessions, bringing in engineers to even just contribute thoughts in the call.
It's easier, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I love it.
It's like it makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
And then everyone's happy.
You catch so much stuff early on, get great ideas.
How often do you like go celebrate by yourself?
Yeah, that does not feel good.
You know what I mean? But like if you do something with a group, even if it's like not that great, well, let's go celebrate.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. It's that shared vision, that team aspect of it. Yeah, I love it. I think we should also do more sprints, design sprints.
Everything should be fast.
Yeah, I found that it's kind of very team dependent. I'll say.
Yeah.
Microsoft, but
it's also product cycle dependent. Like there's time where you need to close something down. There's time where you have room to explore. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask one last question before we jump into like the lightning round, rapid fire. How do you maintain an aligned vision and forward momentum on a project when differing opinions across teams threaten to stall the progress?
There's usually a reason why something, like why there's a tension or why the progress is stalled. Like there's usually something there. And I think it's important to like dig into like why are these teams not agreeing with each other?
Yeah.
Again, we're like on the same company. So I usually approach the hard part of the problem. There's this phrase I say frequently, which is like group before self. Like what can I fix for the group before I think about myself? And so your question gets me, there's lots of examples of this, but it's not that, I don't see it as a bad thing usually. Usually the tension, the thing that's making it hard, if you get like both groups focusing on that problem, then everything gets easier, You either solve it or you agree that it's not solvable but it's not about fighting. There's something going on there. So there's in my feeling, it's what is the best thing I can do for the group. Like I guess like family first is also another feeling. Like this is my family, this is my company.
Yeah. Definitely.
Like if you were thinking about your family and they're fighting over some thing, the people are probably talking about themselves, right?
Yeah.
But there's like a thing they're not talking about, which is what really needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
That may not be a very helpful answer to early in career person.
I think it's great. No, it's it hits at this notion of like really, truly building relationships and the importance of it. And I think that it's you almost tackle problems, view problems differently when you actually have built that relationship, that core trust within those other team members. Just the way that you approach sharing your ideas and conflicting opinions. There's a lot more. I don't think I ever use this word, but synergy across
you're
that
getting
team.
corporate now.
It's the first, but yeah, it's exactly what it is. Though there's definitely more alignment, and it's just
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said earlier, we succeed or fail together. I mean, when there's a conflict, there's usually a power dynamic happening. Like somebody wants to be right, or they believe they're right. And if they could do it all by themselves, they'd just go do it. They wouldn't need to work with the other team. So there's some things that happen when these conflicts come up that I don't like. One of them is people start voting. Like, which one should we do? To me, that's not in service of the end user. That's a tactic to not have conflict. And I think conflict can be totally fine as long as it's respectful. So I don't like to vote ever. I like to be decisive. Doesn't have to be my decision, but I don't want to vote. And then the other side of that is like people abandon the conversation. I don't like that either. I don't like when people give up. I think you need to walk towards the conflict and be in service of getting to the answer respectfully. There's also some things that get in the way. Sometimes, like, people will want to go fast. Like, time is the goal. Like, we need to do something by this date.
Yeah.
And I think that also is a problem. Now, some companies, you have to do that. I like to think about having a quality release. Like, we're only going to release this when the quality is good. Mm-hmm. And that's my way of saying, don't let time motivate bad decisions. That's another privilege, though, right? Like, we're sitting here in this big palace. Like, Microsoft makes a bunch of money. We can make that decision. That doesn't exist for lots of companies, lots of teams and people. Like, they're time based. So I just want to own that. That's like, it's a nice thing that we are able to do that. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I know we're running short on time here, so I want to ask just a few quick back-to-back questions. Take as much time as you'd like answering these. But for starters, do you have a favorite book that you recommend to others?
Well, if I'm talking to early in career people, there's this book. It's Universal Principles of Design. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It might be like 125 Universal Principles, whatever the title. I think it's that. Yeah. That book really helped me because you remember earlier when I was talking about, like, I had to use my imagination to, like, solve a problem. Yeah. The Principles of Design book, which may not be principles at Microsoft, but they're sort of like really good principles of design. When I read through it and I had an idea, if I couldn't find a similar precedent or justification in that book, I knew I wasn't going somewhere. And sometimes I would use the book as a reference and go, oh, this is a golden ratio thing, or a rule of thirds thing, or a babyface bias. I use babyface bias all the time. Babyface bias is, I'll like very loosely state, like, if you were to see an old man and a little baby, just on appearance, you would trust that little baby more. It's a human being thing. And so if you apply this to UI, in the enterprise IT pro world, if I take a cloud-based web application that's heavy duty, solves all these problems, and I make it look like a toy, it won't, like, the cockpit of a 747 doesn't look like a child's toy, right? It looks like it's black and white with switches and stuff everywhere. And the person that uses it feels like a professional, Likewise, if I have a consumer product, I need to make it comfortable and approachable. And so that principle, if you were just to think about, it's a baby face, it's actually really about connecting the aesthetic to what's going on. Like there's a reason Excel looks like Excel. There's a reason Azure looks like it does. And when somebody's like, we need to simplify, it doesn't mean, have big giant buttons everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I think that's important. Like that book, Universal Principles of Design, it helped give me like the language and the things I needed to defend my approach and stop taking the criticism like it was personal, because it never was personal, just felt that way.
Yeah.
Good question.
Oh, yeah, I love that response. It totally resonates, and I think oftentimes people think that great design has to be beautiful, and fancy looking, and
No,
that's the last order of anything we should look for as designers. It's first utility, and if it serves them and it's usable.
that statement also isn't universal, right? Like it sort of depends on where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like function is king here. Form is king if you're looking at some kind of technology for somebody who's not using technology all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like what you might design for a grandmother is going to be different from somebody who's like 18.
Definitely agree with that. What's a show or movie that you've fallen in love with recently?
I think Severance is beautiful.
Great choice.
The ending of that series was mind-blowing. So that comes to mind.
Love that.
I like Wes Anderson movies because of the symmetry. I like a lot of his movies because of the color, Kodachrome. Yeah. A lot of this stuff I watch has nothing to do with design because I have to stop thinking about it,
Yeah, same here. You need some decompression time.
Yeah.
It's great.
When I'm at work all day and I'm stuck in all these problems, I usually go home and watch something that has lots of freedom in it.
Yeah.
Like an adventure about somebody riding a motorcycle around the world or something. Freedom, security.
I found myself watching a ton of deep space related stuff.
Yeah.
Just very I've never been
Adventure.
Yeah, no, it's just I like getting these rabbit holes. I'll just learn a ton about space or whatever have you. But I can definitely feel that. What's a product that you discovered recently that you've felt has been very interesting to interact with or use? Could be physical, digital, web app, mobile app.
I think Cinema 4D is crazy.
Wow.
It's a different way of designing, where you apply these connection points. You I don't know how to describe it. Cinema 4D and Redshift. It's totally different than all of the design work I've ever done where, there's layers and, it's fairly static and, just X and Y axis, but with 3D, animated 3D, programmatic animated 3D, it sort of blows my mind a bit.
Yeah, 3D stuff is super exciting to work with.
I like SketchUp also, three-dimensional spaces.
Yeah.
Designing things three-dimensionally. I'd probably say those two are the things recently that I've found myself tinkering with. Yeah.
That's great. I know Cinema 4D has a ton of functionality. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
No, definitely.
It's so powerful. It's intimidatingly powerful. Yeah. I'll watch a YouTube video of that. In the first, let's say it's a 10-minute YouTube video. After the person talks about themselves, you're 2 minutes in. I'm following the instructions. And then there's a moment where nothing makes sense anymore. Do you know? Like there's something about that program where it's like it all makes sense and then nothing makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
I can relate to that feeling. I've had that a few times in my career. I think most notably with Adobe After Effects.
After Effects is similar.
As a big learning hump where I was like.
And then you went to Premiere probably, right? Because it made sense.
Mm-hmm. Premiere clicked a little bit easier. Yeah, for sure.
Here's what you do. You go to Video Hive and you download After Effects. You can download like templates in After Effects and then learn in Premiere. Here's what I do in Premiere. You can connect the two of them. And so you like drop into After Effects to mess with the thing and then bring it back to the sequence. That's like how I like to use it.
Wow.
I made a whole video in After Effects once. It took months.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the wrong way to do this. I should have been in Premiere.
Yeah.
And then I just didn't know, I was trying to get into it.
I cannot imagine doing that. So
yeah,
I'll have to give you your flowers there.
Yeah.
Is there a piece of advice that you wish you received early in career? Or conversely, it could be a great piece of advice you received.
There was a quote that my mother said once, which was, it takes time to make history. And when I was young, my ambition, I wanted to move really quickly and do something and accomplish. I wanted the feeling of accomplishment. But I think the journey of your career is what you remember fondly. It's not like the promo or the bonus. That's nice, but it's really like the story of your career. And so I think perseverance and resiliency, if I could go back and talk to myself, I would say, remain grounded and push and keep pushing and keep being resilient. Persevere when things are tough. And I know that advice is shared in different ways with lots of people. Yeah. I don't even know if it's the best advice, but it's not so much like the sacrifice of perseverance. It's that what you're going to remember 30 years after you start is the story that you went through and all the people and all the experiences and the ups and downs. It's not the sort of material aspect of it. I was reading this book, and it was a book about, it was like a murder train mystery book. There's a murder on a train. Anyway, at the very end of the book, the author is giving their thanks to, the book's over, and the author's giving thanks to the editor and his partner, and friends, and all this stuff, right? And he said something, I'm going to try to paraphrase it. He said, I used to think that a legacy is what I would leave behind, but really, my legacy is what I take with me. Right? It's my it belongs to me. It's all the friends I have and all the people I met and my memories. That doesn't actually stay behind. I mean, you could say if somebody did a great thing, they have a library named after that, but actually that's somebody else's library. It just has their name. It's the legacy that you leave behind is the stuff you get to take with you. sure, there's some pride in the accomplishments of a career in terms of level and whatever, all that stuff. But it's like my friends and all the things that were taught to me and all the mistakes I made and the cringy moments and and those moments where I happened to say the right thing at the right time and I didn't even know. And I was rewarded for it, for like making an unknowing mistake. So anyway, I would say like it takes time to make history is really an honest and brutal reality that it's about time and that the legacy you will leave behind is actually what goes with you. At some point I'll leave here and somebody else will have the job, and it'll be their thing. But I'll bring with me like all those stories and Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Yeah, of course. No, it's been honestly my pleasure. It's been such an honor hearing you speak and share. So much valuable insights. Just lastly, the last thing I'll say to that point, there is actually a Kobe quote that's resurfacing after you said that. And I believe he said the reward or the beauty is in the journey, not the destination.
Yeah.
And really taking the time to enjoy that.
Yeah.
Look around you, smell the trees, the flowers. But because we'll look back fondly on those moments 10, 15 years from now. So
that's a good quote.
I'm definitely paraphrasing it. I don't think he said it word for word, but
I remember something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. He also is somebody who, like, it was about the hustle.
Yeah.
And the perseverance.
Yeah.
And, like, the ethic. Mm-hmm. Like, he worked.
Yeah.
And I think that if you were to observe the behaviors he had and try to apply that to any job, but like in design, there's some similarities. I mean, in terms of repetition, iteration, like seeking the next best way to do something. There's a balance of like art and logic. Like there's a game being played. There's constraints, but there's also some freedom. You're dependent on other people.
Yeah.
You can't win on your own. Yeah. That's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
This is your podcast.
Mamba mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree anymore though. Yeah. It's been such a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
It means a lot taking the time today. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me make sure this is